why countries exist at all, and why humanity keeps redrawing them. The invisible system. Pause for a second and imagine tomorrow morning you wake up and every country disappears. No India, no United States, no Germany, no Japan, no passports, no governments, no border crossings, no immigration, no national flags. At first, that sounds amazing. No bureaucracy, no paperwork, no restrictions, just freedom. But then the questions begin. Who owns roads? Who controls airports? Who keeps electricity running? Who decides laws? Who protects hospitals? Who collects taxes? Who prevents powerful groups from taking over entire cities? Suddenly, the idea becomes much less exciting. Because whether we notice it or not, countries quietly organize almost every part of modern life. Right now, there are nearly 200 countries on Earth. Together, they govern more than 8 billion people, manage roughly 148 million square kilometers of land, and oversee more than $110 trillion of economic activity every year. That number is difficult to understand. $110 trillion is larger than the entire annual economic output of humanity for almost all of history combined. If you tried spending $1 every second, it would take millions of years to spend that amount. That means countries are coordinating human activity at a scale that would have sounded impossible to nearly every person who ever lived. But here's the strange part. If you traveled far enough into space, you wouldn't see a single border. No lines, no labels, no countries. From orbit, Earth looks continuous. The Himalayas are visible, oceans are visible, forests are visible, borders are not. And yet those invisible lines influence some of the biggest outcomes in your life. They affect which schools you can access, what laws protect you, how easily you can travel, which currency you use, how businesses operate around you, and sometimes even how long people live. Think about that for a second. Two children can be born on the same day, with similar potential, and yet grow up in completely different worlds because they happen to be born on opposite sides of an invisible line. That sounds strange because it is. Earth never created countries, humans did. Countries are one of the few things that completely shape human civilization while existing mostly in collective agreement. And that raises an interesting question. If countries are not natural features of the planet, why do they control so much? To answer that, we have to go back, way back, because for almost all of human history, countries didn't exist at all. Before passports, before borders, before governments, before nations, humans still survived and humanity still traded, people still cooperated. So what changed, and why did we eventually invent countries? That's where the story really begins. When humanity outgrew trust. Humans have existed for roughly 300,000 years. Modern countries, at least in the form we recognize today, are incredibly recent by comparison. Most are only a few hundred years old. That means for more than 99% of human history, countries didn't exist. No passports, no citizenship, no immigration offices, no customs checkpoints, no national identity, nothing. So how did humans organize themselves? The answer is surprisingly simple. For most of history, humans lived in small groups, families, tribes, and local communities. Usually these groups contained dozens of people, sometimes hundreds, but rarely more. Everyone knew everyone. Trust was personal. You knew who owned land, who could be trusted, who broke promises, and who contributed to the group. If someone stole, people remembered. If someone lied, people knew. If conflict happened, it was handled directly. That world sounds primitive today, but for a very long time, it worked remarkably well. Human beings evolved in exactly this environment. Even today, anthropologists often discuss something called Dunbar's number, the idea that humans seem capable of maintaining only a limited number of stable social relationships before trust begins to break down. The exact number is debated, but the principle matters. Human beings evolved for communities, not civilizations. That wasn't a problem for thousands of years because people simply lived small. But eventually, humans accidentally broke their own system. The reason was agriculture. Around 12,000 years ago, humans stopped moving. Before agriculture, most people survived by hunting and gathering. If food disappeared, people moved elsewhere. Agriculture changed that completely. People settled permanently. They planted crops, stored food, built structures, and created the first stable communities. At first, this looked like a huge improvement, and in many ways, it was. Food became more predictable. Settlements became larger. Villages appeared. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Cities became civilizations. But agriculture created a problem nobody expected. Population exploded. Around the year 1, Earth had roughly 200 million people. It took hundreds of thousands of years to reach that number. By 1800, humanity crossed 1 billion. Today, we have passed 8 billion people. Think about how unusual that growth is. Humanity spent almost its entire existence trying to reach 1 billion people. Then, in only a small fraction of history, we multiplied 8 times. The problem was that our societies scaled faster than our instincts. You cannot personally know 1 million people. You cannot remember millions of reputations. You cannot personally settle millions of disputes. The old system stopped working. Imagine trying to run a modern city using village rules. No contracts, no institutions, no legal systems, no police, no bureaucracy, only personal trust. Everything would collapse. Civilization had created a problem humanity had never faced before. How do strangers cooperate? How do millions of people trade with people they don't know? How do people trust someone they will never meet? That question changed civilization forever, and humanity's answer became one of the most important inventions in history. We invented systems, we invented institutions, and eventually, we invented countries. And this is where the story becomes strange, because solving the problem of trust created something even bigger. Countries became one of the most powerful technologies humans ever invented. If topics like this make you look at the world differently, subscribe. We're going much deeper. Countries, humanity's greatest trust machine. Countries solved a problem that sounds simple, but turned out to be one of the hardest challenges in human history. How do millions of strangers cooperate without knowing each other? Think about your day for a moment. You wake up in a house built by people you've never met. You turn on electricity generated somewhere else and delivered through infrastructure built over decades. You drink water managed by systems you don't control. You eat food grown, transported, packaged, and sold by strangers. You use money issued by institutions you've never personally verified. Almost every important part of your daily life depends on people you do not know. That may not sound impressive because it feels normal, but historically, this level of coordination is extraordinary. 10,000 years ago, almost everything in your life came from people you knew personally. Trust came from relationships. If somebody broke a promise, people remembered. Reputation controlled behavior. That system worked in tribes because everybody could observe everybody else. But civilization created a new problem. Once populations became massive, personal trust stopped scaling. You cannot personally know 10 million people. You cannot personally verify millions of transactions. You cannot personally solve millions of disputes. So humanity invented substitutes for trust. Rules, laws, contracts, governments, courts, standards, institutions. Countries became frameworks that allowed strangers to cooperate as if they trusted one another. Instead of saying, I trust this person, civilization gradually became, I trust the system. That shift changed everything. Think about a modern airport. Every day, thousands of strangers move through it. Passengers trust pilots. Pilots trust air traffic control. Air traffic control trusts regulations. Airlines trust fuel systems. Governments trust international agreements. Almost nobody in that chain personally knows anybody else. And yet, it works. Now imagine that logic expanded across the entire world. Every year, humanity produces more than $100 trillion of economic activity. Food reaches cities with populations larger than entire historical empires. Hospitals treat millions of patients. Financial systems move enormous amounts of value every day. Not because everyone trusts everyone, but because people trust institutions. Countries became one of the largest coordination systems humanity ever created. But this creates another strange realization. Countries feel physical. Maps make them look physical. Borders make them look physical. Flags make them look physical. But countries themselves are not physical objects. You cannot hold a country in your hand. You cannot physically touch sovereignty. You cannot see citizenship. In many places, if you cross a border, the land itself looks almost identical. So are countries fake? Not exactly. Because some of the most powerful things humans created are invisible. Take money. Most money today exists digitally. You cannot physically see most of the world's wealth. It exists as numbers stored inside systems. Yet people work for it, build companies around it, and trust it. Why? Because everyone collectively behaves as if it exists. Countries operate in a similar way. They are agreements backed by institutions. They exist because billions of people agree that certain rules apply in certain places. And that agreement creates real outcomes. Roads exist because of it. Schools exist because of it. Hospitals exist because of it. Rights exist because of it. Infrastructure exists because of it. Entire cities exist because of it. Countries may begin as ideas, but ideas coordinated at scale become reality. And once you realize that, maps start looking different because you begin to understand something strange. Countries are not natural objects. They are human inventions, which raises another question. If countries are inventions, why do they keep changing? Why maps never stay the same? Once you realize countries are human inventions, something strange starts happening. You stop seeing maps as permanent. You start seeing them as snapshots. Because one of the biggest illusions of modern life is that countries feel ancient and permanent. We grow up seeing the same borders on maps, the same flags, the same names, and unconsciously assume they have always existed. But history tells a completely different story. Open a world map from 100 years ago, and it looks unfamiliar. Open one from 500 years ago, and it feels like another planet. Countries appeared. Countries disappeared. Empires rose. Empires collapsed. Borders moved. Entire populations woke up under new governments without moving a single kilometer. That sounds impossible today, but it has happened repeatedly throughout history. That tells us something important. Countries are less like mountains and more like software. Mountains change slowly. Countries get updated. Think about how strange that is. Human beings often talk about countries as if they were discovered, but countries are designed, negotiated, built, modified. Many borders that exist today were shaped through war, treaties, trade agreements, political decisions, negotiations, and historical accidents. Some follow natural features like rivers and mountains. Others look surprisingly artificial. If you look carefully at maps, some borders are almost perfectly straight. That's because in many cases, humans literally drew lines. Not because nature demanded them, because people made decisions. And once those decisions were accepted, they became reality. But here's the strange thing. If countries change so often, why do they feel emotionally permanent? Because countries stopped being just systems. They became identity. For most of human history, identity came from family, tribe, village, or religion. People lived locally and thought locally. But as societies became larger, humans needed something bigger to belong to. Countries became that larger story. Shared language, shared memories, shared victories, shared losses, shared symbols, shared values. That emotional layer changed everything. Because people rarely sacrifice for geography. People sacrifice for meaning. Think about national holidays, sporting events, flags, national celebrations. None of these are required for administration. They exist because countries are not only systems of rules, they became communities of imagination. Millions of strangers who will never meet, but still feel connected. That connection turned countries into one of the strongest organizing forces in human history. But it also created a paradox. The same force that creates belonging can also create separation. The instinct that says, "These are my people," can sometimes become, "These are not." And that tension has shaped much of human history. Countries became incredibly successful because they solved two problems at the same time. They created order, and they created identity. But now, something unusual is happening. For the first time in history, technology is beginning to challenge both. The world after borders, or not. For decades, people predicted that countries would become less important. The argument sounded convincing. Technology would connect humanity, trade would connect economies, the internet would connect people, distance would stop mattering, and eventually, borders would fade away. For a moment, that prediction seemed believable. Today, you can study from one country, work for a company in another, buy products from another continent, and talk instantly with people across the world. A single smartphone can involve design in one country, raw materials from another, manufacturing somewhere else, software built globally, and customers spread across continents. Human activity became increasingly international. So naturally, people started asking, do we even need countries anymore? But something unexpected happened. The world became more connected. And countries did not disappear. Because globalization solved movement, countries still solve coordination. When electricity fails, people still expect governments to respond. When disasters happen, people still expect institutions to act. When infrastructure breaks, people still expect someone to repair it. When laws fail, people still expect accountability. Countries still organize roads, hospitals, courts, education systems, water networks, emergency services, infrastructure, taxation, public safety, and long-term planning. The internet connected people. Countries still organize them. That doesn't mean countries stayed unchanged. The competition between countries has started evolving. Historically, countries competed through land, resources, military power, and population. The logic was simple: control more territory and become stronger. But increasingly, the competition looks different. Countries now compete for talent, for businesses, for innovation, for investment, for education, for researchers, for entrepreneurs, for people. Some places attract opportunity, others lose it. The strongest countries of the future may not necessarily be the biggest. They may become the places people choose instead of inherit. And that creates a strange possibility. What if countries are not the final version? Think about history. Tribes once felt permanent, then kingdoms replaced them. Kingdoms felt permanent, then empires expanded. Empires felt permanent, then many disappeared. Now countries feel permanent. But history keeps repeating the same lesson. Human beings continuously redesign how large groups cooperate. Countries solved one of humanity's greatest problems: how to make billions of strangers trust one another enough to build civilization. That does not guarantee countries are the final answer. Maybe they remain for centuries. Maybe they evolve. Maybe future generations invent systems we cannot imagine today. Nobody knows. But history suggests something important. Human institutions change, which brings us back to the question we started with. Why do countries exist at all? Not because mountains created them, not because borders naturally appeared, not because Earth divided itself. Countries exist because humans discovered something difficult. People do not naturally cooperate at massive scale. Countries became the system that allowed billions of strangers to trust each other, to trade, to build, to organize, to create civilization. Countries turned anonymous individuals into functioning societies. And once you realize that, maps stop looking normal. Because every border was once an argument. Every country was once an idea. Every nation was once a story enough people agreed to believe. Which means the world you live in today is not permanent. It is simply the current version. And maybe hundreds of years from now, people will look at our maps the same way we look at ancient kingdoms and ask, people really organize the world like that? One final question. If humanity started over tomorrow, would we invent countries again? Or would we build something completely different? See you in the next one. If you enjoy videos that break down the hidden systems shaping the world, subscribe. We've got much bigger questions coming.